Have you ever dreamed of escaping the city and living in the countryside? It sounds appealing, but where in the countryside? Where is it cheaper? Where is life easier? Today, I'm sharing our experience of rural living in France and Australia, comparing cost of land and houses, off-grid possibilities, food quality, and other hidden pros and cons. And the results may surprise you. Over the last 10 years, my wife and I spent significant time living in the countryside in both France and Australia. And whether we're in one or the other, people often ask us, which country do we prefer living in? And it's not a straightforward answer. The reasons can be very personal, but there are some aspects that can help you decide. In this video, I'm covering a short list of factors that helped us decide, at least for now. Stick to the end, one was really a deal breaker. Let's jump into it. Land and property. What can you get for your money? In France, the average price of a house in the countryside is about 250,000 euros, roughly 400k Australian dollars. Of course, this varies greatly depending on the region or whether or not you are close to popular cities like Paris, Lyon or Bordeaux, but it gives you an idea. In Australia, the average price of a house in the countryside is about 600k Australian dollars, roughly 350,000 euros. What about rural land? Is it cheaper in France or Australia? Well, it depends on the size of the land, the location and the purpose, for instance farming, forest or residential. But in general, in the countryside, here's a brief price comparison. It appears that small rural property, so 1 to 10 hectares, are cheaper in France, and large remote properties, 50 plus hectares, are cheaper in Australia. So where do you get the most for your money overall? Well, if you want affordable small rural land with the house, France probably wins. If you want large remote land at low cost per hectare, Australia wins. But there are other factors that may impact the final cost of a property, especially if you need to build or do renovations. In Australia, there are fewer regulations in remote areas. You can build off-grid structures more easily. There are more freedoms to harvest rainwater and install solar without strict permits. In France, there are stricter zoning laws and bureaucracy can make off-grid living more difficult. Many rural properties require costly renovation to meet building codes. But for land and property costs, I'll still give this one to France, given that for the type and size of acreage we own, France would have a cheaper entry price. But stick around, as I also discuss restrictions and bureaucracy later on in this video. Second important factor, cost of living. What or where is it more affordable? As of 2025, the average cost of living for a household in France is approximately 2,600 euros per month, or about 4,500 Australian dollars. In comparison, in Australia, a family of 4 typically spends about 5,700 per month in Australian dollars, or approximately 3,500 euros. So we could say it is 20% more expensive to live in Australia, except you have to take into consideration the average income as well. It is about 100,000 Australian dollars in Australia versus the equivalent of 75,000 Australian dollars in France, so about a 25% difference. So as a more accurate but still very crude comparison, we can conclude that you would be about 5% better off financially in Australia. Also, let's not forget that tax rates and tax rebates vary significantly between the two countries, with France generally having a higher tax burden. For instance, in Australia there is no wealth tax. There is a lower GST or VAT, as we call it in France, 10% versus 20% in France, making off-grid equipment cheaper. And there is no mandatory social charges for self-sufficient living. So on cost of living, even if it may appear lower in France at first glance, I still have to give it to Australia, given a slightly higher income on average and a more beneficial tax system. If you are interested in cost of living in Australia, I made a detailed video a while back. Check it out if you want some specifics about the country. Let's now explore climates and sustainable living possibilities. When living off-grid, you are somewhat at the mercy of the natural elements, so it is important to choose a location not only that has a climate that allows you to generate energy, grow food, harvest water, but also in a location that allows you to build off-grid systems. In Australia, there is more sunshine, so better solar power generation. Depending on where you live, because Australia is a big country, it is easier to grow tropical and Mediterranean crops, like in Queensland, New South Wales, Northern Rivers, and Western Australia. Rainwater harvesting is legal and commonly used, but water scarcity can be an issue in some regions. In France, in comparison, you have more consistent rainfall for agriculture and water supply. It's easier to grow cooler climate crops like wheat, apples, and nuts. There's more forestry resources as a whole for firewood and timber, and less extreme heat compared to Australia, reducing the need for cooling systems. So for climate and sustainability, I'll give it a tie. Australia is better for solar and tropical crops, and France is better for water and cool climate farming. Next up, quality of life, and I'm casting the net pretty broad here, including weather, culture, community, food, and lifestyle. As we talked about before, weather have different patterns in both countries, and although climate in general is fairly moderate in both France and Australia, especially where we are in New South Wales northern rivers, we can experience some harsh summers and long period of droughts, but also some pretty devastating rainy seasons. France, on the other hand, probably experiences less extreme weather, although colder and tougher winters. Lifestyle is probably the factor of comparison most personal to you. In my case, I'm a bon vivant and an outdoor enthusiast, so what I really love about France is the market culture, the love of the terroir, the traditional food, the wine, the delicacies, the charcuterie, the bread. But I also really like the barbecue culture and the outdoor and adventurous life that Australia has to offer. And although I can't find a lot of the French food that I really enjoy here, I can try to replicate some of these dishes, and I've grown quite fond of kangaroo meat actually, which is quite lean and healthy. Community-wise, I think it's easy to integrate rural communities in both countries. And whilst if really remote, Aussie rural lifestyle can be all about space and isolation, you can also find what you find in French villages with the strong sense of community in areas of the country that are a bit less remote. So in France, French cheese and wine are cheap, but Aussie meat and veggies are fresh and more local. So which lifestyle wins? I'll give it another tie, with Australia better for the outdoors and the sense of adventure, and France better for the quality of food and traditions. Last one, the hidden cost of bureaucracy, the deal breaker for us. As we covered before, in Australia, even though it is far from being a free-for-all, and it is regulated, in comparison with France, I'm pretty sure that there are fewer building codes in rural areas, so it is easier to do DIY structures, less restrictions on off-grid systems such as the collection of rainwater, which is allowed and even encouraged in some areas, and off-grid solar and batteries are probably cheaper. France, from our own experience and research that we did, there are stricter planning laws. Off-grid houses need specific permits. All building restoration often need to respect and protect historic heritage. Many villages require the homes to be connected to the power grid. And finally, the red tape and a bureaucracy hurdle is a bit legendary in France, with long forms to fill and long delays in most things. So this one I'll give to Australia, with fewer building restrictions, easier off-grid setup, easier and faster to get permits. So final verdict, which one is better? In summary, when comparing affordability of property, cost of living, climate, quality of life and bureaucracy, we choose Australia for now. But again, this is a very personal choice. If you want space and a DIY-friendly life, Australia might be for you. If you love history, strong community tradition and affordability, rural France is hard to beat. Which one would you choose, the French countryside charm or the Australian bush freedom? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video, and if you liked it, don't forget to put a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe as well if you don't want to miss the next one. See you next time.